I am live. This is the internal sadist. This podcast is going to be about she hide behind plausible deniability. Plausible deniability basically is what's going to be about. And women typically do this on a regular basis, and it's one of those things where like everybody always tries to present themselves in a way or a light that a way or a light on doing things and on how everybody blah blah blah. Okay, my words are jacked up. Okay, here we go. Basically, what happens with that is what people always try to present themselves in a way or a light that basically seem make it. Women try to always present themselves in a way or a light that makes make themselves seem as if they're not. If they're not, what's up, Seafood Black Hours? If you're still here, to make it so they can seem as though they're not like not the ones who's actually doing all the picking or the one that's always making the one that's making all the decisions, so they can always have the back door out for all intents and purposes. Because the sad part about that is a lot of women do this stuff on a regular basis, and when they do it, it's one of those things where you as a man have to understand it, notice it, and be able to either a stave it off, or b make it work, make it work for you in a way where you can actually make it benefit in your way to actually or make her the one that's actually capitulating to the whole entire thing. So it's one of those things where, as a man, you have to be able to make her one that's actually investing in you. Because at the end of the day, let's just keep it 100. A woman cannot be trained. Women do the training. Men do the actual. Women are the trainers. Men are the trainees for all intents and purposes. When it comes to relationships, that's the cold hard truth when it comes down to it. Because at the end of the day, men ain't training shit. Women are actually doing all the training. Because the sad part about that, women don't even have to do it physically. They can do it mentally. They do it mentally to a man. And the sad part about that, men are so fucking men are so emotionally, mentally weak when it comes to stuff like that, to being manipulated, that they don't even realize they're being trained. Like a good example of that is anytime a woman goes, I'm cold, what does a man automatically do? They'll either give her a coat or they'll wrap her arms around her or, they'll turn up the heat, or, stuff like that. Or she goes, oh, I'm hot. What he'll do is basically he'll turn up the AC or he'll open a window or turn on the fan, just stuff like that, where women typically are manipulating men into doing things. But the sad part about that is women are able to use plausible deniability for that reason, for the fact that they technically didn't ask you to do it, but it's inferred that you actually do it. This is typically how this works when you see women using plausible deniability on men. And the sad part about that, when it happens, a lot of men don't even realize it's happening to them at the time when it's actually taking place, for the fact that it's not one of those things where men actually really notice or men really recognize that they're actually being manipulated to the point of any point for all intents and purposes. Because a lot of men believe, well, I'm in power, I'm in charge, and this, that, and the other, and this, that, and the other, when in fact they're really not in charge and they really don't have the power. This is the funny dynamic between DS dynamic, because at the end of the day, the person who's actually relinquishing power to the other person is the one who actually has all the power, because they can always pull the plug on any given time for all intents and purposes for that reason. And that's typically how that works. So the person being dominated actually has all the power because they can actually stop it at any given time. It's typically how this shit works. Just because they allow you to do something to them doesn't mean you have power. Hence the word they allow you to actually do that to them. And this is one of those things where a lot of men don't seem to understand this, and they always want to make it sound like they're actually one that's in charge. When in fact, nigga, you the one. You're second in command, because all this stuff can be unplugged at any given time. And I always find it funny how men always try to use that type of thing as them being in charge, when in fact they're really not in charge. The only way you actually ever be in charge of a woman is your child, and that's slowly dwindling with this government going on. Or if you're a pimp, if you're not a pimp, you're not pimping women and putting them out on the streets. You're not in charge. You're not going to ever be in control of a woman at all. That's typically how that works. So if you're not pimping women and you're not putting them out on the street, you'll never be in control of a woman. And this is exactly how this shit works. Because men always say, well, dom game and this, that, and the other. That stuff is bullshit. All that shit is bullshit. For the fact that all that shit doesn't matter. For the fact that She always has the opportunity to opt out, especially in the Western world. Now, I'll be fine if you're talking about doing stupid shit like that in a third world country, but we're talking about doing shit like this in a first world country where women have all the power to do anything they want. Women have the power to change their mind like the wind, whereas men don't have the opportunity to change their mind like the wind and don't have the opportunity to remotely defend themselves, let alone actually be men in relationships for all intents and purposes anymore. Because the sad part about that is men always get caught up in these fake, fake misnomers or fake beliefs that they can control women when in fact you live in a gynocentric world. Women have all the fucking power. No matter how much power you think you think you're enforcing on a woman, you will never have that complete power over a woman for that reason, for the fact that it's a gynocracy. It's not a masculinocracy. It's not a masculinocracy. Masculinocracy. It's like, no man's in charge. Women are in charge no matter what. A woman could cry right now and all the laws will be changed tomorrow. That's typically how this shit works. So what you got to say and what you believe means dick. Because at the end of the day, you could be in a DS dynamic now and, she's in a DS dynamic with somebody else tomorrow. Who's in charge now? And the sad part about that, the thing that I love about DS dynamic people that they always leave out is that the success rate to DS dynamics and relationships and shit like that is it has a very, very low, or it has one of the lowest rates of relationships for all intents and purposes, for the fact that it actually beats out lesbians for a low success rate. Now think about that. Lesbians move in, get divorced, and move back out again basically in a matter of seconds, and DS dynamic actually lasts less than a lesbian relationship. That's typically how a lot of that shit works. Because what happens, what they don't tell you in the DS world is a lot of women have other partners. That's pretty much how that works. Because the sad part about that is when it comes down to it, it's one of those things where it's kind of like if you're in a relationship with a woman and there's only but so many things that she'll let you do, but her ex-boyfriend was doing more than when she let you was doing more. That's pretty much the same relationship within a DS dynamic. Like it's the same as if you're in a regular relationship. Her ex-boyfriend was doing all this extra stuff to her, but she's more PC around you. It's typically one of those things where like you're only allowed to do but so much, whereas this other guy's allowed to do even more to her, or this other guy's allowed to fulfill a fantasy. Because the sad part about DS dynamics is what men don't tell you that actually participate in this shit is that these women actually have multiple partners who actually dom them out for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where like you might be just a spanker and a slapper, and she might be licking your boot, but the other guy's actually dicking her down and tying her up and bounding and gagging her and like hoisting her up in the air and hoisting her up in the air like a pig and shit like that on a spit. And all you get to do is like lick my boots. Oh, that's it. Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it basically would be no different than if you were a simp and you were paying for a woman. You're basically paying for the woman to do simple shit, and you're not getting any pussy. And the other guy that's her friend is fixing her shit. And you got the other guy that's eating her pussy. You got the other guy that's actually dicking her down. You got the other guy that's the backup guy, just in case the first two guys, the one that eats her pussy and the one that's dicking around can't step up. You got that other guy. Then you got another guy, buying her shit. You got another guy, fixing her car. You got another guy fixing her kitchen. It's one of those things where it's like that's pretty much where you fall at in our whole entire pecking order when you do DS. So at the end of the day, you have no power for the fact that the woman always can opt out, and the woman always has all the power in the world. That's the overall problem. And if anybody in the DS community want to, anybody in the DS community want to challenge this shit, feel free to drop a link in either my emails or my Discord, and we can debate this on a Sunday. And you will lose. You will lose very badly. It's simply how that shit will work. Because you'll find out very quickly how much power you don't have in a DS dynamic, even though you're trying to explain it away. It's typically how that works. So it's one of those things. It's one of those things where, like, women always have the power to opt out at any given time, especially in a first world country. maybe in a third world country, but the sad part about third world countries is people in third world countries don't take too kindly to you disrespecting their daughters, their mothers, or their, you know, or their friends or their nieces. Like in a good example in Latin America, if you're not from Latin America, or you're not from that Latin American country, the chances of you getting away with some stupid shit like that is slim to none because you end up on the news or you end up a body part hanging from a trestle. That's pretty much how it works. Or you're washed up on shore in another country altogether. So it's one of those things where it's like when these people preach all this bullshit about this shit, you really don't have no power whatsoever because you're always at the mercy of somebody or something. Like a good example of a DS dynamic, the thing that explodes the DS dynamic for that reason is people will say like, oh well, I have this power and this, that, and the other, and this, that, and the other, and this is basically how it works, and I have this power. There's one problem with that. That person right there, who you think you have the power over, actually has to okay you to do the shit to them. And the sad part about that is they have the safe word, so now you have to stop what you're doing to them. Therefore, you're actually not the one that's actually dominant. It's the person that's actually taking the pain or taking on this stuff. They actually have to allow you. It's basically like being in a relationship with a woman and she won't let you do anal, but when she goes to the bar and gets drunk, she lets that sexy bartender do anal on her. You see how that works? You see how that works? That's pretty much how that works. So it's one of those things where women have plausible deniability for this reason, because how plausible deniability works is it gives a woman every option to opt out, or it gives a woman every opportunity to change her mind or opt out. And the sad part about that is basically how it works is, now we're getting to the meat and potatoes of this now. How it works is if she's okay with something, she'll basically get chewed to actually do all the committing to her. It's typically how this works. Like she'll get you to actually say, I love you first, or we're girlfriend and boyfriend first, or we're this, or she'll get you to actually say that we have all these titles. She never actually says anything about having all these titles to you, if you've ever noticed. She's the one that gets you to say that, gets you to say that we're this, we're that, we're this, that, and the other, and this is what we're doing. You actually are the ones that actually do the first committing in a relationship, if you ever notice as a man, when she asks you that simple question, what are we? And I talked about this in the other live stream where, women ask, what are we? What that lets you know is she's actually using she's basically using her mental gymnastics to be able to use plausible deniability down the road some damn where. So she's basically already setting up her out by making you the one that actually making you the one to actually, or painting you in the light to make you actually choose that we're actually in this relationship. That's typically how this stuff works. And women are very good at this for this reason, because they'll actually make you look like you're the bad guy, or they'll make you look like you're the person who actually made this happen. So what happens with that is one or two things will happen. As soon as you open your mouth and say, I guess we're girlfriend and boyfriend, or I guess we're in a relationship, or I guess we're this, or we're this, that, and the other, that moment that you actually admit to that first, you've already lost the battle in the first damn place, because she doesn't even have to commit to you now. You've already committed to her. She already got you. It's a fucking wrap. That's typically how this shit works. She already got you. It's a wrap. So what happens with that is as this relationship actually progresses on, you realize very quickly that she's not in it for you. She's in it for herself. And the sad part about that is that's typically how this stuff works, when you actually are the one that's actually initiating their relationship, because she pushes you to initiate the relationship. She pushes you into the whole entire fray to actually admit that you're actually in a relationship. The funny thing about that is how it actually works is she has all the power and you have none. She just manipulated your ass into a relationship. It'd be basically no different if you two were sitting in the bed and she goes, oh, I'm hot, and you get your ass out of bed and flip on the air conditioner. She got you. That's pretty much how that works. Because the sad part about that, a lot of men will say, well, I'm the one that wears the pants and I'm the one that does this, when in fact you really don't. You really don't. If you live with a woman, you don't run anything nor are you in charge of anything. Because at the end of the day, all she got to do is be like, yes, 911, he abused me. It's a wrap for your ass. That's typically how that works. So that's one extreme that I can actually go to if you're dating a woman and you live with a woman. Even if it's your house or her house, the minute she can put you out of your own house is the minute she can take over your house. And if it's a certain country, if you own the house, it automatically gets transferred over to her if you're abusive. It's pretty much how it works. And if you're married and you get kicked out of your house, even if it was yours before the whole entire marriage, it transfers over to her. And that's typically how this shit works. So you never even have power within your own damn house if you live with a woman, because women have all the power in the house. And the sad part about that is, even if you get out that night, all she got to do is put a restraining order on your ass, and now you can't go back to your house. Now think about that shit. It's your house. You can't go back to it because you have a restraining order on you, and she's living at your house for free. This is basically how women get over on men. And the sad part about that, men always think, well, because I did this, that, and the other, and I'm this, that, and the other, and I maintain my frame, she's going to listen to me and this, that, and the other. No, that's not how the shit works. It don't matter how much frame you got when you're sitting in jail for some shit that you didn't do. It don't matter what your frame is, because what you're going to be framed as is a nigga's dick in your ass, basically. It's pretty much how that's going to be framed. So all that maintained frame will end you in jail, bent over with no grease. Let's just keep it 100. So all that BS, you can miss me with all that BS for all intents and purposes, because it's just some bullshit, and that's all it would ever be, and it's just a pipe fucking dream, because men don't have power in a first world country society. It's typically how it works. Ask the niggas in Canada, when it comes to recording women, how much power they believe they have. A woman could accuse them of rape, and you have all the video evidence, but you can't submit it because of her sexual past. Oh yeah, men have so much power, let me tell you. it's like, and this is typically how this shit actually works. And the sad part about that, it don't matter how much you could train a bitch. They call that abuse. There's a reason why there's plethora different versions of abuse when it comes down to it. It's like it's just not physical abuse, it's emotional abuse, it's financial abuse. It's like a good example of emotional abuse is if you tell a woman you love her and she responds back to I love you too, and you go, psych, no, I'll take it back. That's seen as emotional abuse. Let that just sink in for a hot second. Let that just swirl around in your head for a hot second. This is how much power men don't have in a first world country. This is how much power a man doesn't have at all. Because at the end of the day, a good example of financial abuse is if a woman asks for money, even if it's not hers, if she asks for money to buy something because she really wants to buy something, and you tell her no, that's financial abuse. You see how these laws work against men? You see how this DS dynamic never really works? And the neat thing about a DS dynamic is, because women always try to save face no matter what's going on, all they got to say is, he abused me. He was abusing me the whole entire time. He held me as a prisoner. He held me hostage, and I was scared for my life. Now your DS ass is sitting in jail, getting D down by DS. by Bubba DS, basically. And it's one of those things where it makes me laugh when men always try to paint this beautiful rosy picture that they could just control women, when in fact you're not controlling anything in the whole entire. You're not controlling anything in the least bit. You're not even controlling her. You think you are, and she lets you think she lets you think you are. But the sad part about that is you're not. And this is something that men need to learn in this world. You have no control over that other creature you call your better half, no matter how much you think you do, no matter how much you ever believe you will. You have no control over that person. The sad part about that, this is why, because they grew up in a society where women can always opt out and use plausible deniability to opt out of anything that they want to do. Like a good example of that is a good example of a woman basically trying to use plausible deniability on a man is, I was talking to my friend Tim the other day. He's the one that's, cheating on his wife, has a fiance, even though he's still married to his wife, has a fiance, and he's now cheating on her. This is the one that was at the bar with me saying she wants to kill herself, and I put the knife on the bar and told her, don't call me. Either you kill yourself or fix yourself, basically. That's that woman, yes. Um, so he was basically telling me about a woman, and he sent me some text messages basically, and I read over it, and it's like one of those things where it's like she's basically trying to bait him into saying what they are. So it's one of those things where women would do this to men, and it's in the minute a man actually agrees to a title or what they are is the minute a man fucks up. And the sad part about that, I always say, never capitulate to a woman on what you are. Make her actually say what you are, because the minute she actually says it, she cannot plead plausible deniability. It's pretty much how it works. So she asks you, "What are we?" I don't know. You tell me. Basically, you turn around to her and say, "Yeah, I don't know. You tell me." Because the sad part about that is, it's all about making her invest. If she's not investing, then she has plausible deniability and always has an out card for all intents and purposes. Even if she is investing, it's very hard for her to actually pull out when in fact she gets too much skin in the game. So by her not investing, she has no skin in the game and she can always opt out easily. It's kind of like if you've ever noticed with women, if you go out on a date with a woman, or if you ever took a woman out, or any woman for all that matter, if she happened to pay for something, you best believe you're going to be paying for it. You best believe you're going to be paying that back. It's typically how that works. So she'll set up it in a way where like you have to pay her back basically, and that's typically how women operate. Like if they're invested in you, you either have to pay her back. You basically have to pay her back at some time for all intents and purposes. And it's one of those things where it's like if she's not going to get paid back, she sticks around longer for the fact that now she hasn't got her. Now she can't get out of the game because she has too much invested in that game for all intents and purposes. She has too much skin in it. She has too much skin in the game for all intents and purposes. The best way I can describe it to you. So it's one of those things where you know women will try their best to minimize investing in a man as much as humanly possible. So the minute she can minimize investing in a man as humanly possible, the more likely she's able to get out of what she got going on or the relationship she's in. Because the cold hard truth about it is what a lot of men fail to realize about women is women will use everything in their power not to invest in a man. The minute they can actually pull that off perfectly and flawlessly is the minute they can always bounce. Because the funny thing about DS dynamics is if the DS dynamic break up, the woman's not going to follow you. So how much power did you really have over that woman if she's not willing to follow you? Like think about that stuff. How much power did you really have over that woman if she's not willing to follow you, or she's not willing to be at your side, or not willing to follow you into hell, basically? Because the sad part about that, the mark of a good relationship or the mark of a stable relationship is if a man turns around to a woman and says, "I'm about to go do this drive-by. You with me?" If she says yes, that's a crazy relationship, but that's a stable relationship for all intents and purposes. Whereas, like a DS dynamic, if you tell a woman you're leaving, she goes, "Bye." She's already got somebody lined up to basically knock it out the park while your ass is gone. It's typically how that works. So at the end of the day, it's all about how much power did you really have. And the sad part about that is men who actually get into this stuff like to believe that they have all this power when in fact they had little to no power whatsoever in the first damn place, because she had all the power anyway. She basically was a loaner bike, or she basically was. It basically is that red pill term that we always use. She's not yours, it's just your turn. It's basically how it works. So that's basically how a DS dynamic is actually set up. She's not yours, she's just your turn. It's pretty much how it works. And the sad part about that, she has a revolving door of people, and you don't have that same revolving door. Is typically how this shit works. Because the funny thing about that is when people get into that mess, they typically always do stuff to actually. Anything about men is like men get into these relationships and they believe that she's this great gentle creature and he has full control over her and this, that, and the other, and they found out very quickly that no, you really don't have control over this woman. She has more control over you than you have over your own dick. Let's just put it that way. And the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, here's how you know you don't have control over women and women have control over men. There's a law right now in certain states. If a man gets what's it called? If the man gets snipped, he could be arrested. But if a woman gets an abortion, that's perfectly fine. Matter of fact, there's a law that there's actually protests that say a man jacking off is killing life. There's a bunch of women that literally say this stuff. A man that a man jacking off is equal to killing life. But abortion, not the same. Totally different thing. Totally different thing. And this is typically how you know, as a man, you live in a society where you don't have any power, or you don't have any control. Because the funny thing about that is, the thing that makes me laugh the most about that is there's a man right now that's actually going through court to get his daughter back, his daughter or his son back, basically, so he can stop them from transitioning his child to the opposite sex for all intents and purposes. He's losing very badly right now. He won in the beginning, now he's losing. Now he's trying to appeal it at a higher court. Like, think about that shit. So by the time it actually goes to court, after the COVID virus thing is all over, that child's already going to be transitioned. It's going to already be too late for that dad. And the sad part about that is, you found out very quickly you have very little to no power in the first place. And the sad part about that is because anytime you actually capitulate to a woman, or agree to anything with a woman, you basically signed over all your power and all your rights to do anything or make a decision that you want. It's typically, like, a good example of that is, if you're married to a woman, despite the fact that you're married and you're supposed to be one big unit, if she decides to get an abortion because it's your child, she can get an abortion and it doesn't really matter. That's typically how that works. So your child just got aborted. You wanted to keep it. She wanted to get rid of it. Now it's gone. And the sad part about that is, I already know what men's going to say. Well, I would beat the piss out of her and this, that, and the other. Nice try. I had a cousin that tried that shit. He went to jail for a very, very long time. He just got out recently. Nice try, but nice one. And that's typically how a lot of this stuff works, because the sad part about that is, a lot of men believe that they have this imaginary power over women that they really don't have. And the sad part about that is, when it comes down to it, you find out very quickly that her plausible deniability gives her plausible deniability is basically, think of it like a movie that got ridiculous, and the writers wrote themselves into a corner. Her plausible deniability is like plot armor. Because they couldn't figure out how to write it properly, they had to come up with plot armor to basically make it so that, they can't be defeated. Like, a good example of that is, like, Superman's ass. Superman. There's times when Superman's getting his ass whooped to the brink of destruction. Then all of a sudden, because of plot armor and he's Superman, he all of a sudden comes back stronger and better than ever for some odd damn reason. That's pretty much women in this day and age. Their plausible deniability is their plot armor for anything they want to do in life. And that's typically how a lot of this shit works. And a lot of men believe that, they have this overwhelming power over women, when in fact they really don't. All they got to do is pick up the phone and go, yes, 911, this, that, and the other, and your ass is gone. And it's one of those things. It doesn't matter how much you think you could control a woman. At the end of the day, you'll never be in control of a woman because of her plausible deniability. She can get amnesia the next day and be like, oh, well, no, I don't recall ever agreeing to this. This is basically how he treats me, and I think you should be arrested, officer. And she's smiling in your fucking face over the officer's shoulder as he's dragging your ass off to the car. It's typically how this shit works in this society. And the sad part about that, you got these men up here talking about you could dom a woman, or you can control a woman. What you're actually teaching men is what they refer to as emotional abuse. That's what you're teaching men. So the sad part about that, this emotional abuse is actually a real thing, and men can actually serve time for this emotional abuse. Or this can actually be used against men when they want to build a better case against a man, when they want to pull a man up out of the house, because abuse is abuse in this day and age, because of feminism, because you let it run so damn rampant and wild. So this is how our women tend to have a lot of plausible deniability when it comes to things. Because, like I said at one point in the stream, financial abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, spiritual abuse. They got like 7 different types of abuse, basically. And the sad part about that, you can be tried for all of them if it fits if it fits in certain states, or if they can find a reason to actually push charges against you. You literally can be tried for them. Like, there's a guy right now being tried for spiritual abuse. The woman basically said that I practice this religion and he would never let me practice it, and he makes me stay at home. He's going to jail. That's typically how that works. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's one of those things where, like, you have to understand as a man how much power you actually have and how much power you don't actually have. Because the sad part about that, even if you're in that type of dynamic, you have to realize as a man that this person gave me permission to do this. This person can always rescind the permission to do this. So, how much power do I actually have if this person is the one that actually gave me the permission to do this? And at any given time, they can rescind this permission to do this. You see what I'm saying? So, at what point are you actually in control? At what point are you actually in charge? If this person can always rescind it and this person actually gave it to you. That'd be like you saying, my boss gave me the power to run this place. You do know your boss is in his office right now, so technically you're not running this whole entire place. You're just running it because he doesn't feel like running it, and he wants somebody else to do something so he can actually do his job. So technically you're not running this place. He gave you permission. He gave you temporary permission to basically run this place. So you're not in charge. He's still in charge, or she's still in charge. Let me not discriminate. He or she's still in charge. You just got permission to step in their place. And that's it. At the end of the day, once they step outside their office, your power's gone. And this is something that men seem to don't understand when in that field. Like, she has all the power once she steps outside her office. She just allow you to do this shit. It's basically like the running joke on the Boondocks. He goes, "Can I have allowance?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll give you allowance. I allow you to live. I allow you to breathe. I allow you to eat my food. I allow you to live in this house. I allow you. I allow you to talk to me." It's one of those things where you got to realize as a man that you really don't have any power. And the sad part about that, the faster you figure this out, the better off you'll be as a human being. Because none of y'all niggas got power, and you never have power for that reason. Because at the end of the day, how the society's set up is set up in a way to pretty much benefit women and help women basically get out of shit that they don't want to be in because they changed their mind, all because of a whim or all because their friend was in their ear talking to them. And it's typically one of those things where like men fail to realize this, and they think that they always got this imaginary power or this imaginary hold over women when they really don't. The sad part about that is because of plausible deniability, they allow you to believe that you have this power over them when in fact you really don't have this power over them, because at the end of the day they can always rescind it and opt out. So in all technicality, you're not doming anything and you're not in charge of any damn thing for the fact that she allows you to do it. She allows you to do the stuff that she does to her. Because the sad part about that, I'm willing to bet any money, a lot of these women, any woman in a relationship that I've noticed, typically, I want men to think about this, especially who's been in married and been through divorce court. How much stuff did your wife allow you to do to her? Then she probably rescinded it when she divorced your ass, and she tried to use it as abuse. Think about that. I want everybody, you don't have to tell me. Think about that. Let that swirl around in your head. And think about all the stuff that you've done to your wife in your relationship, sexually and or playfully, and or jokingly, and sometimes out of anger if you said something to her that could be considered emotional abuse or mental abuse or financial abuse. Think of all the stuff that you said to that woman or did to that woman, playfully, sexually, and or seriously. Add that shit up, and that's how you get your abuse charge. That's how you get your "he abused me" charge. That's pretty much how that shit works. And I hate to break it down like that, but that's pretty much how all of this shit works, and it's pretty much how all of this stuff actually plays out at the end of the day, for the fact that this is basically how they get you. All this stuff, you spank her, pull me, choke me, pull my hair, can be bankrolled into like a nice charge to get you put out your house and her to get a PFA put against you. So you got to pick and choose wisely who you date for this reason, because women always have this out to basically use any and all this shit. It's basically what they say. It's basically when the cops arrest you, they read your Miranda rights. What is one thing that they say in the Miranda rights that sticks with you? You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say or do can and will be used against you in a court of law. That is the same thing you have to take into a relationship with you. Anything you say and do can and will be used in a court of law. Think of that same thing. Take your Miranda rights every time you deal with a woman. That's pretty much how this works. And the sad part about that is a lot of men believe or dream or fantasize that, you know, all this great, ridiculous bullcrap when in fact you have none of this power. You never had any of this power. She she let you rent some power so you can feel as though that you're doing anything for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, it's one of those things where like men always get caught up in their emotions and stuff like that because they don't like to reflect sometimes and they think, well, no, you're wrong, Tico, and this, that, and the other. No, I'm right. You know it. You just don't want to face it. That's typically how this works. Like, dude, I'm always right. The faster you figure this out, the better off we'll be. And even if I'm wrong, I would actually admit when I'm actually wrong. When I know I'm right and you think I'm wrong, and there's nothing I said that was wrong, I'm not gonna just admit that I'm wrong to something that I know I'm not wrong to. When in fact we got we got history proof of men that went through this shit on a regular basis and talk about this in their videos. So what you can't tell me is that I'm leading somebody down a wrong path when in fact I'm leading men down a right path. And that's the cold hard truth. Like you're just mad because I'm not willing to co-sign on your shit because you grew up with a single mother and now you want me to co-sign on your shit. When in fact I don't have to co-sign on your shit. You're wrong. So it's one of those things where like you have to understand as a man that you have no power in a relationship in the first damn place. All that power that you believe you have is rented to you or given to you by her. A good example of that is a good example of power being given to you is like I said earlier in the stream when she goes, oh, I'm cold or oh, I'm tired. What do you normally do as a dumbass man? You either give her your coat or you'll turn up the heat. She allowed you to perceive yourself as a protector and provider of her. You didn't really do anything. She basically manipulated a base response that you're going to do any damn way. That's typically how this shit works. Women are very good at manipulating men to the point and believing that they're this great person when in fact you're just being manipulated. You're basically being manipulated and molded into being controlled all the damn time. It's simply how that works. So back to the actual thing as an example. Example one of a woman trying to manipulate a man is, like I was saying, what are we? If you're just starting a relationship, you'll hear this question quite often. If you're a man and starting a relationship, what are we? The minute you actually open your mouth and to say what you are, you've already lost. Game over. You might as well just pack up your stuff. The relationship's already over. Because the sad part about that is, by you actually capitulating first to that answer, you allow her to actually have plausible deniability to opt out at any given time in that relationship, and then you have you on rolling the bag wondering why you're broken up and you're sitting there crying like a little bitch. Basically, that's pretty much how that works. So at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you have to understand what's going on so you can actually better yourself and actually make better decisions within a relationship. Because the sad part about that is, if you can't do that, you're going to suffer, and if you suffer, it's going to suck. But the neat thing about that is when it comes down to it, you have to make her invest in you for all intents and purposes. Because if you don't make her invest in you, you're going to run into a lot of problems. Because at the end of the day, about her investing in you, it's going to make her have to stick around longer because she invested in you. That's the cold hard truth. She invested in you, so now you have to stick around longer. And the sad part about that is the minute you have to stick around longer is the minute you start running into problems. The more you stick around, you make her have to invest in you basically. So the more she sticks around, the more she has to get her return on her investment for all intents and purposes. Dang, dude, that messed that up. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, if you make her invest in you, now she's going to look for her return on her investment. The more you keep on pushing it down the thing, she eventually does a risk assessment analysis to realize that either A, I got to pull the plug now and take my losses, or do I want my investment back for all intents and purposes. And usually women are greedy enough to actually want their investment back, which is actually pretty funny. Women, for some odd reason, women always want their investment back. So if a woman invests in a guy, she's going to stick around until she either A, gets her investment back, or B, you know, basically until she gets her investment back, or B, until she decides that, this is not worth my time. It's typically how a lot of this shit works. So it's one of those things. It's one of those things where if you're going to get into a relationship with a woman, which I usually like, always always go against you actually doing that. But if you're going to do that, I know I have listeners that actually want to do that and do that. You have to make the woman invest in you first. So if a woman asks you, "What are we?" you basically respond to her, "I don't know. How about you tell me? I don't know what we are. How about you tell me?" She might get a little mad because you didn't answer the damn question, but at the end of the day, don't answer that question first. Make her answer that question first. Make her answer that question with actions and deeds. Well, don't even make her answer that question with actions. Make her answer that question verbally. That way, she has to take accountability for the shit that comes out of her mouth. Because if she's not willing to say it physically, she never was really there for you in the first place. She was basically there to basically manipulate you into some shit so she could use it against you later. It's pretty much how that works. So it's one of those things where, like, if a woman can't admit to what you are first, then you're not anything at all. And the sad part about that, there's a lot of women that get away with doing this, and there's a lot of men. If you go back and ask every single man, when y'all first got in a relationship, who actually coined the term first, you or her? 9 times out of 10, or 10 out of 10 times, it's always the man that coined a boyfriend girlfriend relationship first. When he was asked the question, when she asked, "What are we?" It's usually always him that actually says it first. It's very rare for a woman to actually say it first. Because the sad part about that, and women know if they say it first, now they don't put their foot in their mouth. Now they didn't have to invest, and now they put themselves out there. So it's one of those things where they try their best not to put themselves out there because either A, they don't want to get hurt, or B, they don't want to take responsibility for the words that just came out of her mouth. So they pass it on to the man to take out a responsibility. So when they opt out of the whole entire thing, they no longer have to be a part of it. That's the cold hard truth behind it. And the sad part is when it comes down to it, it's one of those things where, like, as a man, you have to always be in full control. You have to always keep your wits about you when it comes to women, because women do this shit on a regular basis. Women would do anything and everything to get you to basically capitulate or do anything for them without actually saying it, because then they can always say, like, a good example of that is if you actually give a woman your coat. Well, let's just say the next day you get the flu or you get a cold or something like that. She'll basically say something to the extent of, "Well, I never told you to I never said you had to give me your coat." That's pretty much what she'll say. And the sad part about that is it's true. It's very true. She never once said that you have to give her your coat, basically. So it's one of those things where, like, you have to realize what you're getting yourself into as a man. You have to realize what is going on with you. You have to be honest with yourself, what you're actually in. So it's one of those things where you have to, as a man, realize that women will always be there to manipulate their way out of getting themselves into any mess for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where, like, you have to be able as a man, be able to control the situation, take control of the situation, for the fact that never admit to doing anything first, or never admit to actually being anything first. The sad part about that is a lot of men get caught up in this mess, and they tend to always believe that, that they got control of this, or they believe that they are, oh man, they basically believe that they are, they're in control when they're really not in control for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where it's like, you as a man have to be able to discern when you're being manipulated. Because the sad part about that, men get manipulated on a regular basis. Hell, I've seen men that claim they're dom get manipulated by women who are not even a part of that whole entire thing. I've seen men get manipulated by women on a regular basis, but they swear up and down that they're alpha males, but they're always being manipulated by women but you're an alpha male. How's it like? Make that make sense to me. It is one of those things where like you have to be honest with yourself as a man, because if you can't be honest with yourself as a man, nobody's really going to believe you. Nobody's ever going to believe. Nobody's ever going to believe anything out of your mouth for the fact that you're not that part. You're not that type of person, and it's not your character. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, it's basically like it basically goes back to the whole entire talk about like her ex boyfriend, you know, you know, had her dressing up in different costumes, and he did her in a car, he gave her anal, and you can't even finger her butt. Like, think about that. She did anal with him, but she ain't doing anal with you. Like, think about that. So it's all about like women always pick and choose what they actually do with men for all intents and purposes. Like, just because you're in a relationship with a woman, that don't mean you're actually going to get all of the woman. This is something that men. This is something that men always fall flat on by thinking this shit because you'll never be in charge of this relationship. You'll never actually make it. You'll never actually make it so that you're ever in charge of the relationship. Because the sad part about that is at the end of the day, all she has to do is pick up the phone and call the police. Or all she has to do is pick up the phone and change her mind or opt out. It's sad, but it's so true. Like, think about it. All she has to do is opt out. That's all she has to do. And all she has to do is pick up the phone. And all the shit that you did can be used against you in a court of law. This is typically why I always say, never let what a woman does. When you approach a woman and you're in these situations, you basically got to approach it like it's your Miranda rights, for all intents and purposes. Because you pretty much got to approach women like you're being read your Miranda rights, and you got to remember those Miranda rights. When anything you say or do in that relationship is going to be used against you in a court of law, especially when y'all break up, or especially if y'all have children, or especially if you're married, or especially if she wants your place, or she wants you out the place, basically, so she can bring another nigga in the place for all intents and purposes. It's simply how that shit works. Because there's a lot of men that do a lot of stupid shit and believe that they're in charge, or believe that they have all the power, or believe all this other great stuff, when in fact women have plausible deniability on their side. At the end of the day, if you don't understand the dynamics of plausible deniability, you would never have a DS dynamic with a woman, for the fact that at the end of the day, it don't matter how much you think you're training a woman. You're not training that woman. That woman is training you, because at the end of the day, she can always opt out of that whole entire situation. She can always say stop, or she's done. Then what? Now you're there holding your dick, basically, and you still got blue balls. You see what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where a woman can always opt out, and women can't be trained for this reason, for the fact that they know that they have options. Women always have options. Just because you think you're it right now, that don't mean your relationship can't be in the fridge tomorrow. And that's pretty much how a lot of men, that's pretty much what a lot of men think in this day and age, when in fact, that's not how this world works. It don't matter what you think. This ain't the 1950s. You ain't a caveman. You're not knocking bitches over the head and dragging them back to the cave. It's not working like that anymore. There's these things called laws and certain protections that is in place for women that's not in place for men. Like, a good example of that is, if a woman doesn't want to give you money, it's not financial abuse. If a woman wants to tell you she loves you and she wants to take it back, it's not emotional abuse. If a woman mentally abuses you, it's not mental abuse in the least bit. It's only mental abuse when you do it to her. And this is typically how this stuff works. And all these different things were set up just for these type of relationships, or situationships that as we'll refer to them as, or arrangementships, for all intents and purposes, because that's all it really is. Because it's not a relationship, it's an arrangementship. You arrange these deals to actually do what you want to do. And the sad part about that, even in this deal, she has all the power in this deal, because she can always opt out of this deal. That's typically how this works. It's just like a marriage, only you're getting screwed over and getting left holding your own balls and dick, for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is, men always think that they have all this great power when they really don't. You really don't have any power. Let it go, move on, and dream about this shit at a later date and time. because the sad part about that is this power you think you have, you really don't have in the least bit. All this power you think you have, you really don't have in the least bit. Because at the end of the day, she can always opt out or use it against you, and now your ass is ass out, cash out, basically, thinking that you were this great person. Now you're thinking you're in denial as a great person in prison, while you're getting done in the ass by a great person in prison, a great big person in prison. So it's one of those things where you as a man have to realize you really don't have any power. You really don't have any skin in this game. You really don't have any teeth when it comes to this. But that's going to be it for me. Y'all have a blessed day and be good to yourselves. Peace.